Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to MoCo Resistance with a special report. My name is Harold Malderano. Welcome you to this special report from MoCo Resistance. Syria Falls, Wars and Rumors of Wars. Today is Monday, December 9th, year of our Lord 2024. We're going to cover two things. Of course, what happened in the Middle East. The Assad regime has fallen, and Syria's 13-year civil war is on its end. And then we're going to interview military political expert Paul Janiczek, MCPS graduate from Albert Einstein High School, who has some thoughts on what's going on in Ukraine and also in the Middle East. So let's get started. Assad regime falls in Syria. The rebel forces took over major cities in the country, including Damascus, and Assad fled the country. There's a lot of information out there saying that his plane that he left on went missing, went off the radar. Some news outlets are saying that his plane crashed, and there was no information as to whether he was in that plane or any information on the crash site. There's also information that he left to Russia to seek asylum in the Putin regime. And so that is news that we haven't confirmed yet. So this action that took place this past weekend ends a 13-year civil war in Syria, and then there's a lot of uncertainty about what this means for the 900 U.S. troops stationed in Syria. And of course, this is bad news for the Assad allies, and who are in complete disarray. Talking about Lebanon, Hezbollah, Iran, Russia, and of course we also have to talk about Turkey. It's a very complex situation, and we are going to try to cover the breaking news as best as we can. And of course, it's a moving target, so this information is coming out as soon as we get new information. But Syria falls to U.S.-Israel backed forces. So before we get into the news and Twitter, we're gonna just comment on what's going on in Syria. So if we have the U.S. military industrial complex supporting the rebels and Israel also supporting the rebels, and let me remind you, the rebels in Syria are basically terrorists and extremist jihadists. So we have to put everything in context, and from what we know in terms of the U.S., CIA, Mossad, and other allies of that sort coming together to support a group or a bunch of groups in the country, that means that this coup, this military intervention, the civil war was also put in place in order for the deep state, the cabal, to pressure their interest in the region. So we'll talk about this as we go into Twitter. Okay, we'll get into Twitter feed, and the first tweet is from Sovereign Bra. Makes good points. A U.S. and Israel fund proxy warfare against Assad but ain't arming Syrian rebels. So this is his summary of the conflict in Syria. Syrian government collapses. Israel and NATO invade Syria to stabilize the region, in quotes, and an open quote, prevent it from falling into the hands of Islamic extremists. Would they fund it? So, and finally, the last point is Greater Israel Protects project moves forward. So if members of the audience who don't know what the Greater Israel Project is, Israel's plan to increase the size of Israel that would include areas in Syria, Saudi Arabia, and in Egypt. So we'll listen to the tweet from Luke Rodlowski. He has a video. Breaking: Israel is announcing that they are capturing territory from Syria in the Golan Heights buffer zone. So this is, again, talking about how Israel wants to expand its territory.
This is a historic day for the Middle East. The collapse of the Assad regime, the tyranny in Damascus, offers great opportunity, but also is fraught with significant dangers. This collapse is a direct result of our forceful action against Hezbollah and Iran, Assad's main supporters, It set off a chain reaction of all those who want to free themselves from this tyranny and its oppression. But it also means we have to take action against possible threats. One of them is the collapse of the Separation of Forces Agreement from 1974 between Israel and Syria. This agreement held for 50 years. Last night it collapsed. The Syrian army abandoned its positions. We gave the Israeli army the order to take over these positions to ensure that no hostile force embeds itself right next to the border of Israel. This is a temporary defensive position until a suitable arrangement is found. Equally, we send a hand of peace to all those beyond our border in Syria, to the Druze, to the Kurds, to the Christians, and to the Muslims who want to live in peace with Israel. We're going to follow events very carefully. If we can establish neighborly relations and a peaceful relations with the new forces emerging in Syria, that's our desire. But if we do not, we'll do whatever it takes to defend the state of Israel and the border of Israel.
And this is very interesting because Israel was not attacked by Syria. And why is Israel attacking or going into the Syrian conflict? Well, of course, they get interest of self-preservation, but I see this as a very, at least, very suspicious act by Israel. And of course, more to come, but let's continue. All right, this week, the Iranians, Lebanese, Hezbollah, and in fact, the Russians are all over on their back heels now as a result of what has just happened in Syria. Former SATCOM commander Frank McKenzie says after Bashar al-Assad's government appears to have fallen to rebels. So let's hear his commentary on this. And this is again talking about Syria's allies in the civil war.
Former CENTCOM commander, retired General Frank McKenzie, joins me now. And General McKenzie, this must have been extraordinary for you to watch the speed of this happening.
Over the last 48 hours, it has been a remarkable chain of events. Bad news for a lot of people, less clear who the good news is going to be for, Martha.
I want to take it country by country in a moment, but let's talk first about those U.S. troops, 900 U.S. troops in Syria. What happens to them? What do you think they should do at this point?
Well, Martha, it's important to understand why those troops are there. Our troops east of the Euphrates River, paired with our SDF partners, are there to keep a lid on ISIS and prevent violent extremist organizations from gathering strength and being able to attack the homeland of the United States. ISIS aspires to attack us. As we know, ISIS launched a successful attack against Russia just a few months ago. That's why those troops are there. So any decision to bring them out would need to weigh that going forward, and I'm certain that the new administration will take a hard look on that when they come into office.
But what about the chaos that's happening right now, the change that's happening? What does that mean for those U.S. troops who are there? More danger?
We'll be able to defend ourselves. I think actually there's probably less danger right now than there was before, because what you see are the Iranians, Lebanese Hezbollah, and in fact the Russians are all on their back heels now as a result of what has just happened in Syria. One of the best equipped, best trained, and most capable forces in all of Syria today is actually our Kurdish partners east of the Euphrates River. They'll be able to defend themselves. I'm confident of that, Martha.
And you brought up Russia, Iran, Hezbollah. What does it mean for all of those countries and the region?
They all placed a bet on Bashar Assad, and that bet has turned south for them. Russia's interest is maintaining its air base and naval base on the eastern shores of the Mediterranean. So they're going to try very hard to keep that base with whatever entity comes into power in the wake of Bashar Assad's departure. The Iranians need Syria as a land bridge so that they can move equipment into Lebanon in order to threaten Israel. So that's going to be they're going to be very concerned about that. And of course, Lebanese Hezbollah has also propped up the Syrian regime for many years. For all three of these entities, this is bad news because now they had a partner, not necessarily a good and capable partner, but a partner. And he is gone. He's left the stage. So they're going to have to negotiate with who comes in. So it's bad news for them. It's less obvious, Martha, who it's good news for. I'm not sure ultimately going to be good news for the people of Syria. We could have an Islamic State arise there, which will have profound negative implications across the region. That is possible. There are other possibilities as well. And I think in the next 48, 72, 96 hours, this will begin to become clearer to us.
And you talk about an Islamic State. The Islamic group leading this rebel offensive is considered a terror group. They had ties to al-Qaeda. Who are they? I know they say they're trying to be different now. What do you expect?
Well, we have a $10 million bounty on the head of that group, Jelani. So he has a significant track record. Certainly, he could evince new ideas coming in. It's been my experience, though, that typically they don't. I think what you're going to see is a period of infighting. They'll hold the capital. They'll try to establish themselves. They'll try to seek recognition. Russia will try to work their way back into their good graces. Iran will do the same. I think Israel will be concerned about the possibility of attacks across Golan. It's my understanding that the Israelis have probably moved some forces into a buffer area in southern Syria in order to protect themselves. So it's a significant moment in Syrian history. I wish I could be more hopeful that it will mean good news for the Syrian people. I think that's very unclear right now, Martha.
And President-elect Trump has weighed in on his social media platform saying Syria is a mess but is not our friend. The United States should have nothing to do with it. This is not our fight. Let it play out. Do not get involved. So what do you think will happen when President Trump takes office?
I think President Trump will look at the merits of the case. Our interest in Syria is probably preventing violent extremist groups from being able to plan and execute attacks against our homeland and the homeland of our friends and partners abroad. I agree with him. It's a mess. They're no friend of ours. They've never been a friend of ours. But we have interests, and those interests are preventing attacks on the U.S. homeland from ungoverned spaces. If Syria could very well become an ungoverned space, so we'll have to approach that and look at it as he comes into office, and I'm sure he'll take a good hard look at it.
So this occurrence in the Middle East is huge. It carries a lot of weight, as you just heard, in terms of the geopolitical stability in the region. Of course, we have NATO playing along, and we have a lot of similarities to what happened in Afghanistan and to what happened in Iraq, and of course what happened in Libya. So if we put all those situations together, we have similar things happening in Syria. You have U.S. Israel-backed rebel forces that include radical jihadists, and you have terrorists in those rebel groups. And the U.S. and Israel have funded and have supported these groups, and now they have come ahead and they have surpassed their objective, and they're kicked out. They're destroyed and overtaking the Assad regime. And this is just basically what is amounts to the start of major developments in the region, because Israel wants to expand its territories. Turkey wants to expand its trade with Middle Eastern oil producers like Qatar, and the pipeline between Qatar and Turkey that Qatar and Turkey were working on now seems to be a possible deal. So these are the reactions that we're seeing in Syria. This is a tweet from Jason J. Smart. Syria celebrates the fall of the Assad regime.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Let's continue. We have a tweet from Muslim Daily. Look at the joy on the faces of the prisoners as they are freed in Syria. Let's be straight about this. The Assad regime, like many other tyrannical governments in the world, they go after their political opponents, and anybody who opposes the main narrative of the regime gets sent to prison. And these are the prisoners who were released. So there's one person that says, quote, I have been in prison for 10 years. What happened? End quote. So the regime fell, and these are the prisoners who have been freed from the Assad regime's gulag. what comes to mind for me is that if the Western mainstream media and the U.S. media are, applauding this event, well, there's something behind it, and it's nefarious and it's negative. So we have to wait until everything plays out and see what's going on. All right, let's continue. We have a tweet from engineer Nia Sikera. I apologize if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. While Assad is likely to fall as rebels advance on Damascus, this is from December 7th, Donald Trump says the U.S. should stay clear of the conflict in Syria. Meanwhile, U.S. bases in Syria. So right here we have in blue, we have a map of Syria, of course, and we have the Syrian army in red, and of course the reported U.S. bases. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 bases in northern Syria. I applaud Trump's comment, and he's right. America first. We don't need to get involved in never-ending conflicts like this one. This conflict has been going on for 13 years, and a lot of money, a lot of tax-paying money has gone there, and useless, basically. I don't think we have geopolitical interest there, aside from maybe the low-hanging fruit, which is possible terrorist organizations planning to attack. But as we have told you in many episodes, this narrative about U.S. interest being overseeing the activities of terrorist groups that might attack the homeland, that's far-fetched. Something to consider, yes, but not with the information that we have. And they use it as an excuse for U.S. involvement in the region. So let's continue. So before we move away from this map, so the red is the Syrian army. The gray, dark gray, is the areas that ISIS is in black. So I'm assuming it's the gray area. The yellow is Kurdish forces right here up north. The green areas are rebels. So the rebels have pushed from north to south. They have engaged the Syrian army that has been defeated. So more to come, of course, in this event. Let's continue. So this is what I was talking about. So we have different interests, different geopolitical interests, like the Middle East and Turkey, for example. News Rules Geopolitics says now that Assad has fallen, there is no political obstacle to building the Qatar-Turkey gas pipeline. So yes, it's economics, it's geopolitical all over the region, and this is the tweet goes on and says the planned pipeline, which runs through Syria, is meant to provide Europe with alternative to Russia gas. Oh, so there's the kicker. So why is NATO, Israel, and the U.S. supporting the ousting of Syria, so they can build this pipeline? Look at that, Qatar right here, up north and northwest, through Saudi Arabia, of course, through Syria, Turkey, boom, in Bulgaria as well. So this would supply natural gas to not only Turkey but to Europe. So that's why NATO is involved. So we have some background to back the incentives that NATO and Israel have on supporting terrorists, basically, in the form of rebels that defeated the Assad regime. All right, let's continue. We have Stu Peters, who is calling it. He says Syria has fallen, of course. There's tons of information out there, but I found this very interesting. Mossad and its puppets in the U.S. government have overthrown the regime of Bashar al-Assad. We're watching the Greater Israel Project play out right in front of our eyes. So if you don't know what this is, this Greater Israel Project has been going on for a long time. The reason why Israel has attacked Palestine and also supported the rebels in Syria is because their plan is to increase their land to where the blue region is right here. So this is their plan: Greater Israel, that includes parts of Egypt, of course, the Gaza Strip, parts of Syria, parts of Iraq, and Saudi Arabia. So one of the reasons why Mossad and the CIA carried out a 9/11 attacks was because they wanted to start a war. They wanted the U.S. to attack Iraq, to attack other parts of the Middle East, of course, Afghanistan. But this was their modus operandi. So this is one of the objectives of the Israeli government, and yep, it's coming to fruition. And so a lot of events are going to probably result from this. All right, so we have breaking news. People seem very excited in Syria tonight as they can be heard blasting machine guns into the sky to celebrate the fall of the Assad regime. Now, yeah, take it into context. Yes, you had a dictator in the country that was ruling without any challenge, any opposition, and any opposition that it had was basically suppressed and also jailed. So yes, I think if I were Syrian, I would also be celebrating. All right, let's continue. Here we have a tweet from Santino. Breaking alert: Syria, almost 61 years of the Ba'athist pan-Arabist and nationalist socialist ideology, and 54 years of the Assad family dynasty rule in the Syrian Arab Republic has fallen. Too much power for a long time. So that's the family that has controlled Syria for 50 years. And here's one of the best commentaries I found about this. This is Jack Posobiec. He says the idea we're not involved is a joke on the fall of the Assad government in Syria. So this is what I've been telling you. We, as a country, behind the Biden regime and also previous governments, and through the CIA and the military industrial complex, have a hand in this. So let's hear this out.
Looks like the Assad government is collapsing as fast as Macron's government collapsed just last week. And President Trump over there sitting down with Macron just a couple of days after his own government is in a state of absolute collapse. Now we look at Assad's side. And look, if you seriously mean to sit there and tell me that we don't have CIA involvement in all of these various groups, while this guy's sitting up there, al-Jilani, and we're calling this jihadist, this head cutter, a moderate rebel, and he's going on CNN. He's got the Zelensky makeover with the green, and he's got his nice coiffed beard, and suddenly, it's all very serious. We all want to work together, and no, don't even. I got a bridge in Baltimore I want to sell you. So the idea that we're not involved is a joke. These groups have been funded and trained by the United States. It was Operation Timber Sycamore that President Trump ended. But when Obama, boy, like Jake Sullivan got back in there, Victoria Nuland got back in there under Biden, they turned this absolutely right back on. And who are they working with in the South? That's the Syrian National Army. Who are they working with in the north? The Free Syrian Army. And the Free Syrian Army is directly controlled by Turkish intelligence. Now, this Jilani guy, he's an Arab. So he's a Sunni Arab. He's coming out. And by the way, that Turkish-backed army, Steve, you've got Mongolians in there. You've got Central Asians. You've got conscripts from all over. This is a steppe people army. These are not by the way, the Uyghurs are in there from East Turkestan, aka Xinjiang in China. So you've got a whole dog's breakfast of types that are on the Turkish side. Then the Sunni Arabs, that's HTS. So this guy al-Jilani, by the way, born in Saudi Arabia originally, was fighting in Al-Qaeda in Iraq under a guy by al-Baghdadi. And Baghdadi is the one that sent him to Syria in the first place. This is Baghdadi's deputy.
So we have the U.S. Deep State running the show, running guns, running money, and fostering this type of results in what has been a long civil war in Syria. Things are really exploding, and this is right before Trump gets into office next month. Crazy. All right, let's continue. This is a tweet from Shamidi Sharma. Syria has officially fallen, with rebels now in control of Damascus. Syrian national television and radio is presumably under rebel control. This is a video that shows that a TV station where the rebels are taking control. There are more voices supporting this idea that what Trump said, that the U.S. should stay out of the conflict, and I support that. I agree with that. I think that is the best solution right now. Get our troops out as safe, as safe and promptly and as secured as possible. Not like the Biden debacle in Afghanistan, how our troops left, and then work with our allies in the region to oversee the results of any potential outflows that come out of this. So this is again a tweet from E. This is why Syria is falling. In case you wanted to keep calling me a conspiracy theorist, it will happen. Again, yes. So this is the Greater Israel map that Israel, and to be fair, this is not something new. We've seen Israeli soldiers actually have on their uniform a map of this on their side. So anyway, we have breaking again. These are images of the Israeli Air Force carried out widespread strikes across Syria, focusing on destroying strategic weapons at a risk of falling into hostile hands after the Assad regime's collapse. The strikes also targeted weapon production facilities and air defense systems. So that's what they're saying to the public. So again, this was a orchestrated event that resulted in what we know now as huge news. The Assad regime has fallen. All right, let's go ahead and look at the next video. It's a tweet from Being Libertarian. They told us what would happen to Syria. This is the only country left to fall is Iran. So this is the plan by the U.S. military industrial complex, planning to take over, to destroy the countries and to take over them, of course, to benefit Israel.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the joint staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
So this has been a plan for many years, since at least 2001, after 9/11, and it's being carried out. There's no two ways about it. All right, let's continue. We have a tweet from T that reads, "The Valley of the Christian Syria, home of the Christian community rooted in the early church of St. Peter and St. Paul, has fallen into the hands of jihadists this evening. I will continue to ask you for your prayers. The Christian population is scared and is fearing for what is to come." So Democrats talk about democracy. Conservatives talk about the right to pray, the right to be religious. And I would ask both, pray for the Christians that are in Syria right now, because the rebels are Muslim extremists and they're jihadists, and they're not going to treat Christians kindly. And I hope there's some organizations working to get them out of the country, because if they stay, they're going to be slaughtered. Simple as that. So that is breaking news. That's how we perceive the news. That's our take on what's going on. Of course, there are many other angles and circumstances and information and data that we need to analyze, but we'll do that as the information comes in. All right, up next, as promised, we're going to interview Paul Janiczek. He's a MCPS product, Albert Einstein High School. Go Titans. That's where I graduated from in 1992. He's a military and political analyst covering major war theaters in the world. He has experience at Capitol Hill in the Department of State. He had some stints there. He also worked for the Trump campaign and also for other public and private sector assignments. So, and the topics that we're going to cover are the Middle East and Ukraine. As promised, we have an interview today. We have the pleasure of having Paul Janiczek, a MoCo resident, product of the MCPS system, and we'd like to have you, Paul. Welcome to the show.
Oh, Harold, it's really great to be with you, not just because I love to share my views and hear others, but also because we were friends back in the day at Albert Einstein Burger Tech High School. So it's good to talk with you, man.
Yeah, so it's been a while, but I'm glad that we're connecting again. Tell us about something, what have you done after graduation in 1992 from Albert Einstein High School?
Well, I had been drilling reservist in the National Guard because I got into school away from the area. They let me out of my enlistment to get another enlistment. So I went to boot camp for the second time and became a naval reservist while I attended college, initially at West Virginia University, ultimately graduated with a degree in history. Would you like fries with that? From Frostburg State University. Never really could get my high school dream of joining the Navy, moving to San Diego, and never looking back quite in tow. And I ended up bouncing around Washington to a few internships. I ended up on the campaign finance investigation, the investigative team that was looking into the Clinton finances surrounding their previous elections. It was the last 2 years of the Clinton administration. From there into the Transportation Committee, and certainly learned the old motto that was usually sung by Tip O'Neill, that all politics are local, is quite true on the Transportation Committee. Every little project seems to matter, so you got to bring home that bacon on Capitol Hill. Took a chance on the transition into the George W. Bush administration, parlayed that into working on the NATO desk at the State Department, followed by bilateral arms control with the Russians. Finished up that piece of my life looking into weapons trafficking and weapons trafficking patterns around the world and what they mean in higher politics of the way business is executed. Went to Iraq for a year, volunteered. I asked to go. Came back after the 10-month point and finished out that first stint in government as Deputy Assistant Inspector General for Iraq Reconstruction. And since then, I've been a consultant, a news commentator, and I've drifted in and out of various jobs, generally surrounding politics or defense contracting. And currently, I'm a talking head on Sky News Arabia in the Middle East.
Well, great. Sounds like you've had quite an adventure in your professional life, and we're happy to have you here today. So I wanted to pick your brain on what's going on overseas in the military sense, in the conflicts that we're in, and I would like to get your opinion on what the Trump administration will look like in terms of how they might address, the conflict in Ukraine, and also what's going on in the mess in the Middle East. So I'll leave it up to you to which one you want to touch first.
Okay, and that was one of the hats that I wore in 2016. I actually worked for the Trump campaign It was an interesting ride. I think he himself learned a lot, and certainly the people who constitute his inner circle who have been with him for the bulk of their professional careers learned quite a bit. And they eased into a doctrine in terms of understanding the world, in terms of how they would apply the military around the world, that I guess you could call it a Trump doctrine. It's really more like the what's called the Reagan-Weinberger doctrine from the 1980s. And it was later called the Powell Doctrine incorrectly. It was really Weinberger and Reagan that came up with it. And that was that you would have a very large, well-trained, well-financed force, and that force would be present around the world when and where needed, but ultimately was, with the exception of Europe and Korea, was largely based at home. We would send ships and aircraft over the horizon as needed to make a statement diplomatically, but it was very much speak softly, carry a big stick, a la Teddy Roosevelt. I think that he likes Trump, that is, likes the idea of that, because he likes the idea of having countries assert what their own interests are, and that diffuses a lot of international tensions because it doesn't give countries an opportunity to build resentments, and it really short circuits the United States as sort of an international nanny, if you will, around the world, that the United States engages itself where its interests and that of its true allies are concerned. And that also became an issue, is what constituted a true ally. In the case of NATO, are they actually spending the amount of money that is agreed in the NATO framework in order to remain a member in good stead? When he came into office, that was a no, with the exception, I believe, of Poland was one of the ones, and some of the former Eastern Bloc countries also were spending, were closer to what they were obligated to, but weren't quite really there. Since then, a number of countries have gotten in line. And so this is sort of making the international order a little more orderly, if you will.
Exactly.
And also with respect to international incursions, making sure there was a clear end state, which most of your college history majors would say was the fundamental flaw of Vietnam, is that we really didn't have a victory vision. So I think that's where Trump is on these things.
Yeah, I think one of the aspects that people, jumped on during the campaign, this year was, okay, let's have peace, but let's have peace under the mantle of peace through, military strength. And I think that resonates all over the world in terms of, okay, you have a superpower in the United States that is declining in all aspects of its power, economically, militarily, socially, politically, etc. So, we saw this in the last 4 years, and I think people respected that and got on board with that message. So, peace through strength, I think it's one of the underlining ideas and policies that the Trump administration is going to push.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing is that Trump, love him or hate him, he does what he says he's going to do. People, dislike his modes or his syntax. That's fine and dandy, but the world can trust a leader like Trump, because what you see is what you get. It's interesting, the parallel to my own life. When I was a diplomat and I went into the Middle East, I did my very best to speak Arabic well and to present the way a diplomat ought to. And then at a certain point, I said, I'm the quintessential American. I'm just going to act like it. And that did more to warm people up than maintaining any pretense. Trump's foreign policy is, if you will, the macroscopic implementation of that greater realization, in my view.
Right. So, in terms of, he said that, he promised during the campaign that he was going to address the Ukraine conflict right away, and then, of course, go into the Middle East and sort that mess up. So people are fed up. Today, for example, there was some news that 3 people that were living in a tent in North Carolina, victims of the hurricane, that they died because of freezing temperatures. And where's the government? Where's where's our tax money? And I, for one, I'm totally on board with America First policies in terms of taking care of our own, taking care of our military, of course, and our veterans, and taking care of our people inside, the country. And don't waste any money sending it to Ukraine or Israel or Palestine because we have major problems here at home.
Yeah, that seems to be where the appetite is. Trump is fond of using the endless wars phrase. I don't particularly care for that myself, but that goes to some fine distinctions I make on how wars are conducted. But the fact of the matter is, it hits a very real yearning for America to be more responsible with the money that we give to Washington, D.C. You're an economist, Harold. You know money is fungible. That's Econ 101 right there. And the fact of the matter is that if we have plenty of money to give to Ukraine, even though we're printing it, and I won't go down that rabbit trail, if you will, but even though we're printing it, you have only so much money that your country can give, and if you're giving it to Ukraine and you're not seeing the results of what you're paying for, which is the Ukrainians are losing. There's no two ways about it. They have been losing for a while, and in my outlook, the only thing that is restraining the Russian advance right now is a couple of things. Putin's economy is, I wouldn't say fragile. I wouldn't say it's because of sanctions. He certainly has an inflation problem at home, but he's trying to keep the war from touching the lives of everyday Russians. And so he only commits so many troops to the front line. And those troops, which are largely rookies that are going into combat right now, are still making advances into Ukraine against who are supposed to be battle-hardened veterans of the Ukrainian army. It just seems no matter how much money goes over there, Americans are looking at it and saying, well, what are we getting for this?
I never thought that conflict was going to last more than a year, but here we are. 2, 3 years, almost reaching 4, and no possible solution in the horizon. So that would be, I guess, the first thing that Trump can do to just cease all hostilities and reach an agreement. He's a businessman, so of course he's gonna reach a deal with both sides, and that would be a very welcoming result for all Americans, because again, the money, yes, we can print money, but the return on that investment has been negative. So it will make sense for us to cut our losses, right now, and stop sending money to Ukraine.
And also end the carnage. Right now, it just seems like the Democratic Party is bent on fighting to the last Ukrainian. The Russians are really, like I said, they are not exerting themselves in terms of their national military posture. And the war warnings that you're hearing coming out of certain quarters right now, they're quite real. The decision by the administration to allow the Ukrainians to use missiles that could strike deeper into Russia, and as the logic goes, bring the war home to the Russians, resulting in a destabilization in Moscow. That plan may seem pretty good on paper because Putin's goal has been to keep the destabilization out of the press and even out of the Russian national discussion. But the Russians are not going to sit there and take that. Putin's primary political threat is not from moderating forces that are pro-West. It's from nationalists. It's from hardline nationalists who are really fed up with the way Russia's being treated. And so he has to move to the right, not to the left, in order to survive a political crisis where the war is coming home to Russia.
What are your thoughts on the conflict either escalating to a point where Putin is cornered and his only option is to retaliate big time in terms of using his full military arsenal?
It's interesting because the Russians are still kind of playing by the rules, if you will. I believe it was a week ago. For the past couple of days, I've been out of the news cycle, unfortunately. I wanted to do a little more reading before I came on with you. But when they test fired a new missile using targets in the Dnipro region of Ukraine, they actually notified that using pre-existing arms control channels to let us know that they were going to do it. So they're still playing by the rules there. And it's interesting to see. It's like they're trying to give us the out to let us know they're serious about negotiating. We just have to be serious about reciprocity. I don't think there's a real appetite for the Russians to widen the war, but it just seems that every time we turn around, and maybe this is a segue to the Middle East, it seems like every time we turn around, a new pretext is handed to the Russians to do it. Look no further than the case of the Turkish incursion deeper into Syria against the Assad regime. The Russians have combat units on Syrian state territory right now. And this is really bad because this is a NATO ally working with Al Qaeda and ISIS to dislodge a Russian ally in the form of President Erdogan's Turkey. So we have yet another danger point in the standoff between NATO and Russia that has opened up. Again, the Russian nationalist mind is the thing we need to be most concerned about in terms of driving factors as to whether they choose to dramatically widen the war. But this, again, looks like NATO is expanding and enlarging. And it's bad juju in the Middle East. And ironically, the Israelis are kind of sitting this piece of it out somewhat. They only seem to engage their Air Force against the Syrians when they see there's some material aid to assaults against their homeland. So it's strange times for sure.
And I guess one of the things that I'm concerned about is what you said earlier about the Democrats wanting a conflict, wanting a full-scale war in the Middle East and a full-scale war in Ukraine and Russia, and that will definitely involve us. And if it develops more into a more kinetic actions in Russia. And that's my sense that the Democrat Party and their handlers, their criminal globalist, handlers, they want a war because that's their way out. That's their way out of the money that they need to survive, and also they need the money in a conflict to escape. Because when Trump, comes into office, a lot of heads are going to roll because they committed a lot of crime and they've been involved in a lot of corruption. So. Now going back to Israel, I think that's a beast of its own, and I'm concerned about the human life that is being lost in Palestine, and 30,000 plus. You probably know the number better than I do.
I am concerned about what is happening there. The issue is once again we come to leftists in the United States who are driving the narrative and are driving or attempting to shoehorn Israeli actions here. I think that if we hadn't had Joe Biden in the White House and the Israeli government had gone in there the way that they wanted to after October the 7th, none of this debate would exist anymore. It would have been one and done. It would have uprooted Hamas, which has had a couple of decades now to burrow in as deep as it has. And don't forget, Hamas doesn't fight a fair fight. They hide behind women and children. And the moment you hit a Hamas member, if a family gets taken out after whatever warnings have been given, it becomes the women and children who are the face of the conflict and not the cowards who hid behind them. I personally am a very pro-Zionist guy, but I don't approve of every last thing the government of Israel does, especially when certain elements of the international left have really infected Israeli politics. And I think that part of the reason why the Israelis have been so uncooperative in how they're ensuring their own defense right now is that the White House, under Joe Biden, really thought that they could compel Israeli behavior, and they kept pushing it and pushing it and pushing it until finally the Israelis said, forget it, we're doing it our way. We know we don't have your support. And that's where I see that standoff right now.
Again, we can talk hours on the intentions of Israel and why Palestine is under Hamas control, who created Hamas, and the history behind it, and we can definitely talk about how and why the Palestinians welcomed the Israeli refugees after World War II, and little by little their homeland was taken over by the Israeli government. But that's another story. But I wanted to touch on also in recent days, we've come to know that the International Justice Court, I believe, they issued an arrest warrant for Netanyahu. What are your thoughts on that?
The ICC, I actually worked on bilateral relief for the International Criminal Court. There is, under Article 92 of the Rome Treaty, there is a provision that allows certain states to not participate in International Criminal Court arrest warrants. We have one with Israel, whereas if the Israelis if there's a warrant out for Israeli personalities, that the United States would not honor any warrants that were issued against the members of that country. So they are in fact safe from the ICC on U.S. soil. We have other ICC Article 92 agreements. The European Union as a bloc, when I last touched it, was refusing to participate in Article 92 agreements. They wanted the court to have as much flexibility to pursue what they viewed criminals as anybody else. And I would warn people about unchecked power of a prosecutor, especially an international prosecutor. Is one of the leading prosecutors of the ICC was one Jack Smith, who indicted Donald Trump. Likewise, one of the ways when I was at the State Department, my boss who was John Bolton, actually, one of the ways that he would warn Europeans what they were getting into with their love for Bill Clinton, he would say, well, the last time an international international renown was achieved by a prosecutor potentially going after a leader unjustly was Ken Starr and Bill Clinton. And that actually made them think twice about the power of the ICC. I see the ICC as a corrupt organization. Whatever good they have accomplished is far outweighed by the dangers that they pose. I don't think for a second that the ICC was doing anything other than riding a political wave in issuing these indictments.
What would be your recommendation if you were asked, to brief officials at the State Department right now, in terms of what would be the best strategy to deal with the current Israeli Palestine situation right now?
They're not listening to us anymore, so we encourage them to get it over with and be done with it all. Start again. This really, what we're seeing today, in my opinion, owes a lot of its origins to the disengagement strategy that was come up under Ariel Sharon. And his attitude was, we negotiate with the Palestinians once, and when they don't hold up their end of it, which they really can't, the Palestinians exist on the largesse of foreign countries who sort of dictate the terms of how the Palestinians live their existence. He finally said, okay, we're going to put a wall up and don't ever ask me to negotiate with these people again. And this is the situation you get.
There's a lot of information on what really happened on October 7th, and I got questions on my own, and I'm still doing research on that. And
you constantly got to question yourself.
And my initial question is, okay, you have one of the safest borders in the world, high tech, the best high tech technology used in that border. There's no way that the attack could have happened without any internal assistance. So in my mind, I'm seeing that as a false flag.
That is one of the most uncomfortable questions the Israelis have to confront. My understanding is that Israeli soldiers were reporting the irregularities and preparations that were being made for October 7th. And some of them were told on pain of court-martial, you will shut up. If you think to get people to understand Israel when they ask me about it, and they have a good appreciation for the internal dynamic of the United States right now, I just tell them, take the deep state debate. Is there a deep state in the United States? I think you and I and most of your good viewers would agree that there is one. It's fairly autonomous. It's a mincing leviathan, and it is there. But if the deep state exists in the United States, it really exists in Israel. They have a very big problem with national security elite. in
There's
their.
still a lot of people here, our audience and our colleagues and our fellow geo peers here in the county, that they don't really believe that the deep state exists, and that's shocking.
Too close to the fire, man. That's the way I see it. I mean, my attitude is it's a good thing the deep state rejected me, because I'd be a part of it right now if they hadn't. And I have no problem admitting that. And so there's a tendency to want to view the Israelis as monolithic, just because they tend to keep their differences pretty muted internally, politically, and they have a very funny system that I still haven't figured out. It's like a Rubik's Cube to me. But if you think we have a deep state problem, they have a gigantic deep state problem. And unfortunately, I don't think that Netanyahu and his people ever got to figure out just how deep the whole thing ran. There was almost like a collective denial on the part of the Israeli public. And where it draws its SOCOR from, it comes from the same international left-wing structures that gave rise to some of the malign left-wing groups in the United States that are active and organized. It's the same people, the same monies. Their point of origin is a lot of European banks, and they slant their money into causes within Israel, within the United States, within other countries, towards a nihilistic left-wing thinking. And the Israelis were really slow to catch up on just how pernicious the whole thing was.
There's the Trump followers, and in the last 2-3 years have always said, we're saving Israel for last. And, I firmly believe what you just said, the corruption and the level of, I guess, the deep state apparatus in Israel is deep, is deeper than we have in the U.S. and other parts of the world. That's gonna come. Yeah.
It's extremely deep. And I'll tell you something that I can admit with you and with your viewers, is that if you want to know who Jeffrey Epstein worked for, he was a Mossad asset. That's what Jeffrey Epstein was. And he had most of Washington blackmailed, which is why the deep state exists, is that there's a gigantic blackmail apparatus going on in Washington, D.C. And I saw pieces of it were in plain sight when I worked on Capitol Hill. So the problem is that what the Israelis had set up, what Mossad had set up, I don't want to say the Israelis, because I think that most Israelis, if they understood some of the evil things Mossad was up to, they would be horrified. But if you look at what Mossad had set up, the artifice that they had set up over a long period of time, it's quite genius. But unfortunately, the United States government, some of the recesses of the FBI and the CIA, trafficked with it for a long time and benefited by it.
So, I mean, that's why we have, the Democrats and the deep state are scared, their bananas off, because Kash Patel is being named as the director of the FBI, and then he said he's gonna, put out the Epstein list and the Diddy list and everything under the sun. So we're hopefully that is going to come to fruition, and the whole public will get to know all the details and the level of corruption. Famous politicians, Hollywood stars, and everybody under the sun that is from that falls under the elite category will definitely get exposed.
Yeah.
Finally, Paul, I wanted you to so what do you expect from the Trump administration in the first 100 days?
First 100 days, I think it's going to be a little bumpy. I think that some of the transition picks have left me scratching my head. Some of them are quite good. I mean, for example, John Ratcliffe at CIA is the tonic that organization needs. Kash Patel at FBI is also another very good pick. I worked for a while for Pete Hegseth at the Department of Defense. On a personal level, I like Pete. I'm just not sure that he was the guy that you wanted over at the Department of Defense, because in order to outweigh some of the deep state malfeasance, you really do need a strong leader sitting at the top of the defense structure to be able to do something like that. And we'll see. I hope I'm wrong, and I wish Pete the very best. Likewise, Marco Rubio at the State Department, certainly his instincts and the things he says, they're very Monroe Doctrine oriented, which we need. The problem is having worked in that building, it is the Olympics of bureaucratic subterfuge.
Yes. we used to call State Department employees the Nancys, because they were just always concerned about being pleasing and not angering their foreign counterparts. So
Yeah, massive case of clientitis there.
anyway, I'd like to thank you again for your time. I know you're busy, and I'll put your information at the bottom of the video for everybody who is interested in knowing more about you and your interviews. You have shared a lot of your expertise today, and hopefully this is not going to be the last time.
Indeed, Harold. We'll do it again.
All right, take care, Paul. Thank you.
Blessings, man.
Thank you for watching. This has been a special report from MoCo Resistance. Syria Falls, wars and rumors of wars. We ask you to please subscribe to our channels on Rumble, Telegram, and YouTube, and follow us at Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. Until next time, God bless.